So we're going to discuss today how to take a solo or an idea that you're working on and go outside the box. And what I mean by that is that, okay, especially like if you're playing a bluegrass tune or a fiddle tune, and you want to get a little bit on the more hip, little weird, little funky kind of out there tonalities, you kind of have to bridge the gap. And what I mean by that, if I want to play an altered dominant of some kind of a strange tonality and sneak it into something, and you don't want to do a lot of that. It's kind of like salt. If you add a little bit too much of that to a solo, especially if you're playing with a pretty traditional sounding band, you don't want to add so much of that that it sticks out and makes you look like you don't fit. But it's kind of nice to add a little bit here and there on occasion just to kind of give it a little kick. It's like that little bit of hot sauce in the recipe that sometimes gives it a little bit of something different. Makes you stand out maybe as a player sometimes, if that's what you're looking to do. And also kind of helps the band itself coalesce into a different sound that sometimes will catch the ear of the listener. And that's what this is all about. It's communication with your listener, right? So let's take a look at it. So the bridging of the gap is basically going to be the dominant 7, right? For all intents and purposes, that's what we're looking at. So if a guy's playing, we'll take something simple like a D chord. So a D chord has its own diatonic scale, which is the D scale. You know, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. So to make it dominant, all we have to do is take the 7th tone, the C sharp, lower it a half step. So now we've got C natural, you know. So now that that's present, now the guitar player may not be playing that tone, but there is the tonality of the chord being played by the guitar player, and then we'll combine that with what the bass player is playing, and then we're going to combine that with what you as the melody player is playing. Now it becomes what I like to refer to as a global chord. So it's not just the chord that's going on for the guitar or for the bass or for the fiddle, but it is the overall global chord, the one that exists, you know, when all the different elements are combined. For example, okay, if we're using arpeggiatic things here, so we say the bass player is playing D, and the guitar player is playing the single note F sharp, and I'm playing the single note of an A. Well, I've got a D chord, right? I've got D, F sharp, and A. Now, generally speaking, the guitar player, if he's playing rhythm, will be playing all 3 notes. But the 3 of us together can build a chord, right? So all I'm saying is that if the guitar player is playing D, F sharp, and A, I'm going to play C natural to go with that. Why? Because globally, it makes the tonality of the chord become dominant. Now you say, what's the purpose of this? Well, so if I want to get a little kind of interesting here on some stuff, so we'll add the dominant. You can hear the 7th tonality. But what if you wanted to do something really interesting, like a... So what am I adding there? I'm adding a G sharp. Now the B, it exists in the D scale. So does the A. But that G sharp doesn't. So you're looking at here, go D, E, F sharp, G is the 4th. We're going to add a sharp 4. But since we have that note, the C dominant, you know, the C natural, now what we really have is a D7 sharp 11 chord going on. Or, depending upon the voicing of it, it could be flat 5. So, this gives you something really interesting. So now you've added a lot of spice to a solo if you just sneak that in. Don't use it much, just every once in a while. And by adding that, you're going to add this little bit of hot sauce to it, a little spice to it, and it fits. And even though the listener may go, that's kind of weird, but because of the bridging of the gap that dominant places in there, it pulls it together. It is the glue that glues it together. So that's one of the things that I would say to start being aware of as you're playing. Working through modes, for example, a lot of your modes will have a connection that will allow you to think of fingerings and scalar patterns that will make those things happen. So that's one way of approaching it. I kind of like to think of it more in the in chord shapes, in arpeggiatic shapes. That's kind of my personal approach to it. But this is just a new concept, so just something to take a look at, and hope you enjoyed that.